Hello ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for how long it has taken me to upload this review since the Frozen Nightmare update was released. The iPad that I used to make these videos broke, and I lost all of my audio and footage with it. Thankfully, after months of prostitution, I was able to earn enough money to buy a new tablet. So, now that I've had so much more time, I have a lot to say about Murglun, as well as some tips and tricks for those who have already purchased her or are planning to.
I'm Lord of the Flame!
Murglun is a dragon hero, with all of the same traits as the other dragons in this franchise. She costs $7, she can fly, etc. Since these stats don't tell you anything, here are Murglun's actual stats. Murglun has 654 HP, regenerates 49 health every 2 seconds, has 22% armor, 59 to 110 physical damage, a 22-second respawn time, and slow speed. Dragon heroes don't die easily, since only ranged enemies can hurt them. Murglun is no exception. You can move her into danger without fear of instantly losing your hero. This makes it easier to take advantage of Murglun's innate ability, Lava Blood. Small projectiles rain down from directly below Murglun. Most dragon heroes are unable to hit enemies directly below them, but thanks to Lava Blood, Murglun is the exception. She can hit enemies around her with her regular attack, while Lava Blood damages enemies directly beneath her. Each drop deals 20 true damage, but with the one-man army upgrade, it deals 23 damage instead. The randomness of where the drops land makes it difficult to hit the same target reliably. Moving Murglun to chase after an enemy is a pretty desperate situation. I prefer to position Murglun above crowds of enemies. Not only does this increase the chances of hitting a target, but because it deals area damage, it can hit many targets. On just a single target, Lava Blood does 23 damage every 0.4 seconds, for 57.5 damage per second. This is true area damage, so just imagine this multiplied by however many other enemies are in range. If you want even more damage, look to Murglun's first ability, Magma Pool. Each attack creates a pool of magma that deals 6 damage for every 0.2 seconds that an enemy stands in the pool. Over the course of 1 second, this only amounts to 30 damage total. Magma pools last for 6 seconds, so there will be a source of 30 damage per second for those 6 seconds. Because Murglun takes 2 seconds to attack, another magma pool can form while the first one is active. So, for the 4 seconds that they overlap, the magma pools will deal 60 damage per second. But after another 2 seconds, Murglun can attack again, creating a third magma pool. So, for the first 2 seconds, magma pool will deal 30 damage per second. For the next 2 seconds, it will deal 60 damage per second total. For the final 2 seconds, the total damage per second is 90. I call those the final 2 seconds because afterwards, the fourth magma pool that Murglun creates doesn't overlap with the first magma pool. So, the total damage per second is still 90. Still, 90 true damage per second is very strong. Unfortunately, in practice, it rarely gets this high. For one, the projectiles aimed at flying enemies don't create magma pools, so it's very possible to not have all 3 magma pools active at one time. An even bigger issue is that magma pool damage doesn't stack on the same enemy. Even though the effect on the ground gets darker when multiple pools are on it, the enemy still only takes 30 damage per second. The only way for each individual magma pool to be as effective as shown in my chart is for them to all be in a unique location. So against a single enemy, the most damage that magma pool can do is 30. Since Lava Blood does 57.5 damage per second and magma pool does 30 per second, Murglun's regular attack only needs to be 27.5 damage per second or more for it to be better against a single enemy compared to Lava Blood. Thankfully it is, but if the target has 7% armor or more, her minimum damage per second will be less than 27.5. If the target has 75% armor or more, her max damage per second will be less than 27.5. Her average damage per second is less on enemies with 67% armor or more. Basically, This means that if an enemy has more than 67% armor, it's more effective to rely on Lava Blood for damage than her basic attack. Of course, in the presence of multiple enemies, you can just use both. You can also let her shoot once to create one magma pool, then move her over enemies in order to use both forms of true damage. Positioning her to get the most out of both abilities is tricky, but rewarding. But if trying to position her to optimize two abilities wasn't hard enough, Murglun also has Tar Maker.
I'm Lord of the Flame.
Let's crack some skulls!
Krakatoa. Catch my fire.
Towers near Murglun deal 20% more damage. This only applies to their regular attacks, not their abilities. It also doesn't affect the units spawned by a tower. This means that it has no effect on barracks towers. Although it can buff the damage of the Deep Devil's Reef tower, it has no effect on the units that it spawns. The only exception to this is the Swamp Thing tower, whose damage is boosted even in melee mode. Maybe this is because the Swamp Thing is the tower itself, rather than a unit spawned by it. This buff stacks with the abrasive heat bonus from the Melting Furnace. If you're a numbers person like me, you'll enjoy seeing how high the numbers can get when you combine these two buffs. When combining these buffs on an enemy afflicted by Shadow Mark, you get damage that's just plain sexy. Murglun's next ability is Geyser. Murglun instantly kills an enemy every 50 seconds. I don't like this ability because there's no way to control who gets targeted. In a large cluster of enemies, Murglun chooses the worst possible target to use it on, a jogger with low health. In order to prevent Geyser from being wasted, you would have to move Murglun around so that she can't use her abilities until an enemy seems isolated so that you can bring her to them. In my opinion, this just isn't worth it. With a 50-second cooldown, this ability has no presence throughout the level. Things happen as if Murglun doesn't even have Geyser, and occasionally she just farts it out. Although boring, Geyser is still worth upgrading. The same can be said about Infernal Heat.
Catch my fire.
Murglun creates a ring of fire that lasts for 4 seconds and deals 5 true damage every 0.2 seconds. When both of Murglun's abilities are charged, she will use Infernal Heat first, then Geyser. However, Infernal Heat only triggers when at least 2 enemies are in range. This is actually a good thing, since you can let Murglun use Infernal Heat first, retreat her until the enemies in the way are killed, and bring her back to use Geyser on the remaining stronger enemy. This works as long as the other enemies actually die, although the damage per second is so low that this is rarely the case without a little extra support. One nice thing about this ability is that Murglun can cast it directly below her. This allows her to stack it with the damage from Lava Blood. It also stacks with the damage from Magma Pools, so you can achieve very high damage per second if you combine all three. Overall, this is a decent ability. It does small damage but recharges very quickly, so it acts almost like another passive that just adds on to her damage per second. Murglun's ultimate ability is Eruption.
Catch my fire.
Eruption reduces the cooldown to 90 seconds. Wait, what? Oh, Eruption instantly kills enemies in a selected area. This skill is the first AoE insta-kill that a hero or tower has ever had. I like this ability a lot. it works in ways that not many other skills in this game work. For example, it can still insta-kill enemies being protected by the invincibility shield that Magnus Spellbane can cast. It also works on flying enemies. One thing that does disappoint me is not necessarily Eruption's fault, but rather how the game itself works. In the previous Kingdom Rush games, you could cast Rain of Fire and call a new wave quickly enough that the new enemies would get hit by the meteors. This would allow the player to recharge the spell by calling an early wave, but without wasting the damage it deals. However, in Vengeance, enemies are invulnerable when they first spawn, so using this tactic with Eruption doesn't work nearly as well. It's also possible to accidentally waste it because the meteors may land in odd locations, especially on curved paths. When used on bosses who are immune to insta-kills, it deals 230 true damage. If the very first meteor lands on the boss, there's a chance that the very last meteor will also damage the boss, dealing 462 damage total. Compared to Ice Cult, Murglun is just not as powerful. Ice Cult's area damage and global freeze are just too good. He is definitely better for crowd control. When it comes to individual tougher enemies, I feel that Murglun still doesn't compare, because Geyser is so underwhelming, and her ultimate has such a long cooldown. If it wasn't for Ice Cult, she would be the most powerful hero in the game. But because Ice Cult exists, I can't recommend Murglun based on power levels. However, Murglun has one major advantage over the other heroes, and that's her fun factor. To get the most out of Murglun's passives, you have to position her with a great deal of precision. Sometimes there are so many enemies in one spot that it's better to rely on Lava Blood for area damage than Magma Pool. But sometimes moving Murglun to use Lava Blood actually loses potential damage, because she could instead be near towers, giving them 20% more damage with Tar Maker. From my experience, this is the generalized order of priority for every combination of her 3 passives. But of course, in a case-by-case basis, you have to factor in the position and stats of every tower and enemy for each situation. Making those split-second decisions to optimize your damage output is the most exciting playstyle I've gotten out of any heroes in Vengeance. All of the emphasis is on her passives rather than her abilities. So instead of waiting for her skills to recharge, there is a constant need to micromanage Murglun to a more advantageous position. To some, this may seem like a chore. If so, stick with Ice Cult. But if this type of playstyle appeals to you, I highly recommend Murglun. Plus, Murglun is a female hero, so it's your social obligation to support her financially, because she's an inspiration to giant, fiery, evil dragon women everywhere. I hope you enjoyed this video. Because it took so long to make it, I tried to put in more humor as well as more tips and tricks for using the hero. Let me know if this is something you would like to see more of in the future. I could do reviews of every hero in the series. It would just take a long time, because I like to have a lot of edits in all of my reviews. So if you do want to see a review of every hero in the Kingdom Rush franchise, let me know that as well. Take care everyone, and flame on.